support student programming in peace and security and in small arms violence. So now I'd like to introduce you to the Director of PSR Security Programming, Douglas Shaw. As a member of the U.S. Department of Energy's Nuclear Materials Security Task Force for Russia, the independent states, and the Baltics, Doug worked to secure plutonium and highly enriched uranium from theft or diversion in Ukraine, receiving a meritorious service award for the significant improvement of safeguards and security of tons of weapons-usable nuclear materials. As an aide to Ambassador Thomas Graham at the U.S. Arms Control and Disarmament Agency from 1993 to 1996, Doug was key in the global diplomatic campaign to indefinitely extend the NPT, or the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. This achievement was claimed by former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright as one of the greatest triumphs to American diplomacy in the second half of this 20th century. Well, now we're in the 21st century, but I think many of the people in this room will agree that that is a tremendous achievement. Doug has quite extensive media work. He has spoken on security issues on C-SPAN and NPR. He's published widely, including such publications as the Los Angeles Times, the Washington Post, the Non-Proliferation Review, and in the Bulletin of the American Scientists. Please welcome Doug Shaw. To American diplomacy in the second half of this 20th century. Well, now we're in the 21st century, but I think many of the people in this room will agree that that is a tremendous achievement. Doug has quite extensive media work. He has spoken on security issues on C-SPAN and NPR. He's published widely, including such publications as the Los Angeles Times, the Washington Post, the Non-Proliferation Review, and in the Bulletin of the American Scientists. Please welcome Doug Shaw.
Thank you, Tova. I'd like you to imagine a blinding flash, followed seconds later by a deafening roar. You've just entered the first exhibit of the Museum of the Abolition of Nuclear Weapons. Wind rushes past you, filling the air with ash-like confetti. The signature image of a brewing mushroom cloud projects on the ceiling as images of the devastation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki project on the walls. The room goes dark, and a door clangs open to a winding hallway. The ground slopes down as you feel along the marble walls with the names of Hiroshima's dead engraved on your left and Nagasaki's on your right. A quarter-mile later, you emerge into a brightly lit room, a simulated launch control center for intercontinental ballistic missiles. Your guide asks you and another person, perhaps your spouse, your best friend, maybe a stranger, to join you in facing simulated launch control terminals. A silver key rests in a vertical lock in front of you as your guide firmly intones, "The President of the United States has authorized the use of nuclear weapons. Please turn your key to release your weapon." What do you do? Obviously, this museum doesn't exist yet, but the question is real and immediate. You are now being asked to give your assent to a future in which megadeath will remain a permanent part of the U.S. foreign and security policy toolbox, and the possibility of controlling the spread of nuclear weapons will be lost to future generations. The question I'm here to pose tonight is, do you care? Knowing that the use of a single, relatively small nuclear weapon on Hiroshima indiscriminately killed more than 100,000 people, when would ending 100,000 human lives be a reasonable policy means for the United States of America? In the 1980s, Physicians for Social Responsibility shared in the Nobel Peace Prize for calling on the world to think of the days, weeks, and months following the use of a nuclear weapon. As this country, Russia, and others consider building new nuclear weapons today, facts that doctors and allied healthcare professionals bring to this debate are more relevant than ever. Physicians for Social Responsibility is deeply engaged in this work, and I know that many of you here tonight have been committed to it for many years. I'm deeply grateful to Dr. Worf, Dr. Quiroga, and Dr. Fuller of the National Board, Psr-La's board, and Marta Arguello and Denise Duffield and the staff here at Psr-La for your work and for bringing me here tonight. I'm humbled by what you do. So I've come here from Washington, D.C. to share with you some bad news, some good news, and what I consider to be some urgent news for physicians and allied health professionals. The bad news is that the apathy about nuclear weapons that's widespread today is inappropriate. Some of the people I talk to about nuclear weapons think that it's yesterday's problem, that they went away with the end of the Cold War. The truth is that as long as nuclear weapons exist, they pose an extraordinary threat to human life and health. And it's our opportunity to respond effectively to that threat that's going away. U.S. nuclear weapons policy is in a dangerous drift. A new generation of American nuclear weapons is planned without a purpose, and agreements designed to block the spread of nuclear weapons are being thrown out over politics, and efforts to prevent nuclear terrorism are dangerously inadequate. Mass sickness and death hang in the balance, but no one will know unless doctors and allied health professionals speak out. The Bush administration proposes a new generation of hydrogen bombs, but they can't tell us why. Last summer, Los Alamos National Laboratories produced the first plutonium pit, the trigger for a nuclear weapon that's been made in the U.S. for deployment in the stockpile since the FBI raided and closed the Cold War pit facility in Rocky Flats in 1989. Public hearings are ongoing at sites around the country over the next several weeks to assess the environmental impact of upgrades to facilities for the production of nuclear weapons. New nuclear weapons lead the world in the wrong direction and dishonor the sacrifice and suffering of thousands of Americans who were killed and sickened in the building of the massive overkill arsenal that we already have. While thousands of U.S. and Russian nuclear weapons remain, with many on high alert, the Bush administration has declared its intention to allow the bilateral legal obligations that allow us to verify reductions that were made possible by the end of the Cold War to expire. The framework of overlapping legal rules that codify and embody the end of the Cold War are being replaced one by the kinds of provocative military actions that they were designed to prevent, such as the deployment of ballistic missile defenses in Eastern Europe and the Russian suspension of observance of the Treaty on Conventional Armed Forces in Europe. Decades of U.S. law are being reversed to allow India to circumvent global nonproliferation rules. And instead of taking advantage of the historic opportunity that we have today to reduce nuclear dangers, we're throwing out the rule book. Preventing nuclear terrorism depends on the control of weapons-usable nuclear materials, plutonium and highly enriched uranium. And in Russia and elsewhere, significant stockpiles of these materials remain inadequately secured. The United States is considering a resumption of nuclear waste reprocessing, by which plutonium that could be used for nuclear weapons is separated from radioactive waste. This dangerous activity has been banned in the United States for decades and would encourage other countries to use weapons-usable plutonium in their own commercial reactors. In the medical profession specifically, the use of highly enriched uranium for the production of medical isotopes continues and puts enough nuclear material to produce a nuclear explosive device in civilian use every year, although low-enriched uranium could be used instead.